Last month, I spent $275.77 on electricity. But at this exact point in time last year, I only spent $176.33. It's a $100 difference. Hey guys, I'm Andrew and welcome back to thedirtytank.com, and today we're going to talk about how to figure out how much your aquarium uses in electricity and how to figure out how that translates to cents and dollars on your energy bill. And not only are we going to go over how you can tell how much electricity your aquarium uses, but we're also going to go on ways that you can cut it back to lower the amount of electricity you use on a monthly basis. And guys, I think you're going to be shocked. Some of you, this may make sense, but after I did all the calculations to all the equipment that I have in a 20-gallon fish tank, there's one piece of equipment that uses 60% of the energy compared to all the other pieces of equipment combined. And in some cases, not all, but in some cases, you can completely do without having this piece of equipment in your tank. All right, so let's first take a look at a 20-gallon fish tank and figure out how much energy this thing uses on a monthly basis. Now, the first thing that we have to do whenever you're trying to figure out, well, how much energy does a 20-gallon, a 5-gallon, a 10-gallon, whatever size aquarium you have uses, the first thing you're going to want to do is look at each equipment that uses electricity that you have in your aquarium and figure out how many watts it uses. Now, most people are going to have three things standard inside their aquarium, and that is going to be a heater. Most people have a heater. Most people also have a light, and most people have a filter, right? Now, each heater and filter and light, they're going to be different depending on whose aquarium it is, right? There's so many choices for each of those products, and each one can vary in how many watts they use. Heaters are probably the easiest things to figure out how many watts it actually takes up. So this is the heater that I use in most of my fish tanks, just the high top brand off of Amazon. I use this on all of them. I don't have any issues. I wouldn't say it's an amazing heater, but I don't have any issues and it does the job, right? It's a cheap heater that you can find on Amazon, and it hasn't killed my fish yet. So, you know, I think it's working pretty well. Now, heaters are nice because they're usually rated in watts already, right? Because normally, depending on how many watts it is, will depend on which heater size is appropriate for your aquarium size. So step one is to look at all your equipment and see how many watts each thing uses. So if we look here, my heater for a 20-gallon aquarium uses 100 watts. Yours may be different, right? You may have a 50-watt heater, right? So go ahead and just take notes of how many watts your heater uses. The other very common piece of equipment that you have in your aquarium is probably going to be a light. Now the light that I have is a Nicrew C10 24/7 full spectrum LED light. It's a budget light that you can get on Amazon. I think it costs like 25 bucks. And this light uses 13 watts. So it doesn't use a whole lot of wattage at all, which is pretty interesting. Now, let's take a look at my filter. So the filters that I use are the Marina S20 Slim filters. I like these filters because they get the job done and they're very sleek. They look good. They don't take a whole lot of space in the back of the aquarium, so you're able to get your aquarium much closer to the wall, which I really appreciate. Now, I have two of these filters, hang-on back filters, running on my 20-gallon aquarium, right? Really, I just need one, but I have a lot of filters that I just like to keep seated, right? Now, I looked all over to try to figure out where I can find how many watts this thing uses, and it turns out that it's on the back of the pump of the filter. Now, one of these filters uses 6 watts of electricity, which means since I have two of them, that's 12 watts in total. Now, I also have a auto feeder with a camera, but I'm not gonna really count the calculations for that because I'm really just doing a general everyday, what will most people have in a 20-gallon aquarium? And that's gonna be a light, a heater, and a filter. But if you're trying to figure out how much energy your aquarium uses, you're going to want to count your wave makers, your CO2 system. You're going to want to count any UV sterilizers that you have, any, air pumps that you have for air stones, right? There's tons of extra goodies you can add to your aquarium that's going to eat up some of that electricity. So if you have a ton of things in your aquarium, go ahead and look at the back of the box, look at the cord, look at the back of that product to see how many watts it uses and note that down. Now, this next part involves some math. So I'm going to try to walk through it as simple as possible to hopefully not scare away anyone, but you are going to have to use some math, right? So all of your equipment is going to show how many watts it consumes, but your electricity bill is generally showing how many kilowatts per hour you use, right? And so what we want to do is convert watts to kilowatts per hour, right? And so step one is finding how many watts your equipment uses, and then step two, which is what we're working on now, is figuring out how many kilowatts per hour each thing uses. So let's go ahead and do that math now. So the first thing you're going to want to do is figuring out how long this piece of equipment runs on your aquarium any given day, right? Now we know that the filter is going to run 24/7. So I'm going to put 24 there, runs 24/7, so it runs the entire day. It doesn't turn off. We know the light probably runs anywhere from 6 hours to 10 hours, depending on what you're trying to achieve. My aquarium personally runs on an 8-hour schedule. And then you're also going to want to guess how long your heater stays on as well. I'm going to guess that it stays on about 8 hours of the day, right? And so generally the way a heater works is as soon as it goes under the set temperature, it turns on. And then once that temperature reaches in the tank, it turns off. And it just does that consistently throughout the day. So it's on and off a lot. So I'm gonna have to assume that it's on for about 8 hours. It's definitely not on for 24 hours. It's not on that long. But I think 8 hours is a good number to use for how long the heater stays on. Now, after you figure out how many hours per day your equipment is on for, you're gonna wanna put down how many days throughout the week it's on for. So that's not only gonna be 7, it's gonna be on every single day, but maybe not on for the whole day. And then how many weeks in a year, so that's 52 weeks. And what we're trying to get at is how many watts it uses throughout an entire year. And the reason why we want to do that is so that we can have a more accurate number whenever we then try to figure out how many watts it uses in a monthly basis. Now, after you figure out how long your piece of equipment is normally on for on any given day, then you're going to want to figure out, well, how much electricity, how much watts is consumed throughout the entire year. And so you're going to take however many watts, multiply by however many hours, by however many days of the week, right, by how many weeks in a year. And what you're going to get is a fairly large number of how much watts this piece of equipment uses in a yearly basis. Now, the reason why we want a yearly figure is so that we can have a more accurate monthly figure, because all we have to do at this point is divide by 12. Now, if you look at your electricity bill, it doesn't show how many watts per hour you used. It shows how many kilowatts per hour you use, right? And so after we figure out the yearly usage, and then we figure out the monthly usage by divided by 12, then we divide by 1,000 so we can get the kilowatts usage. And what you come up with is how many kilowatts per hour you use in a given month, right? And so if we look at my figures, we can see that 100-watt heater on for 8 days for every single day throughout the entire year will use 24.26 kilowatts per hour in a month. And the light uses 3.15 kilowatts per hour per month, and the filter uses 8.7 kilowatts per hour in a month, right? Now, the next thing, after you figure out your watts and then how long it's on for, and then your kilowatts per hour in a given month, then you're going to want to figure out, well, how much does your city or your location charge per kilowatt hour? Now, normally you have to Google this, or you can pull up your electricity bill and you can find however many kilowatts per hour it shows on there that you used last month, right? You're gonna take that number and you're gonna divide it by the bill amount. And that is loosely, there's some other taxes and fees that aren't contributing to that, but that will get you a number very close to how much money the energy company charges you per kilowatt hour used of energy. Now, in my area, it's about 15 cents. So if you don't want to do all the math, you can put 15 cents in, which equals for a heater, $3.64, which means my heater is costing me $3.64. My light is only costing me 47 cents on any given month. And my filter is costing me about $1.31 per month. And if I add all of that up, we're at $5.42 and some change, right? And so a standard 20-gallon aquarium is probably only going to increase your electricity bill by $5.40 something cents. So not a ton at all, right? But what happens if you have 30 aquariums, right? So I'm going to go ahead and multiply by 30, and we are at $162.70, right? Which makes sense, right? Last year, I only had about 10 aquariums, so that my energy bill was $176. Now, I have 30 aquariums, right? And my energy bill is $270 something, so $100 increase. And so we can see that, yeah, that makes sense. Having 30 aquariums is going to increase my bill by $162, right? Really, I just went and increased from 10 aquariums to 30 aquariums, so it's a 20 aquarium increase. So if I put that here, that's about $108. And so that's almost exactly how much my electricity bill went up compared to last year, which is absolutely insane. So how can we lower this number, and how can you lower this number? And I think the way to lower this number is, well, let's look at what is drawing the most electricity. And if we look at it, the heater is definitely using a ton more electricity, right? Now, I normally have my heater set a little bit higher, right? Around the 80s. And the reason why is I'm a big fan of dwarf cichlids, particularly the rams. And so they like warmer water. They like 80 to 82 to 83, right? They like it very warm, and that's how you get them to spawn more regularly, because they're more comfortable in a higher temperature. So what I had to do is just specifically set my breeding tanks at those higher temperatures, but then all of my other tanks I'm setting at a much lower temperature. Now, if you look at my garage, I have several racks. The other thing that I'm doing is the middle tanks, the tanks that are surrounded by other tanks, I'm setting those heaters to the low 70s to the high 60s, right? Because what I find happens is that the tanks below, the tanks above, the tanks next to each other are all kind of heating its own tank, but also some of that heat is heating other tanks as well. And so if you have multiple tanks on a rack, you can do something like that to where the heater from other tanks can kind of heat the middle tanks. It's not going to be exact, so you will have tanks with different temperatures, but it is going to help keep that electricity bill a lot lower. Now, what if you're saying, Andrew, I only have a few tanks and I want to lower my electricity bill, so that method with a rack won't work for me. Well, if you have your aquariums indoors, you can probably do without a heater at all, right? And so if I take you around, we can look, and you can probably do without a lot of different items, right? So here's a shallow 5.5 gallon aquarium. I have a beta and a couple chili ras boars in here. And you can see there's no filter on this, right? So I'm saving with the filter. I do have a heater in there, even though I don't really need the heater. I can take that out. And so that will be saving me some electricity. And if we go over here, I have another aquarium. This one has no heater and no filter, and we only have shrimp in here, as you can see. But a tank like this may not need a heater. If we look at this one has no heater, no filter. No heater, no filter, no heater, no filter. And so it's very possible to have a tank without a heater, right? Especially if it's indoors. So I know this isn't possible for every household or every location or for every fish, right? Some fish are going to be demanding more specific parameters than maybe your indoor temperature will provide, right? But if you're in that situation, I feel a lot of people are, you may be able to do without it, but you're gonna want to make sure that you're testing things, right? You're gonna wanna make sure you have a thermometer in the water, right? When you take the heater out over the course of a week, what does the temperature normally fluctuate to? And then the fish or shrimp or snails that you have stocked in that tank, is that temperature range appropriate? And if it is, you can probably do without a heater or a filter. Or if you really want to go low tech, if you have a window tank and just no tech at all, right? It gets sunlight, you have a ton of plants, so it helps prevent algae. You can have something like that where it just doesn't use any energy at all. Now, most of us aren't in that position, right? We want lights. It helps us see our fish better, right? And so for me personally, I like to have some tech in there. But there are some things we can do without. And I think a heater and a filter, in some occasions, for some tanks, for some locations, for some fish, would work. So what are some other ways you can lower your electricity bill? Now, some other things that I put into practice that are lowering my energy bill on a monthly basis is, one, adding tops to all of my aquariums. Now, not all of them have tops. The very low-tech ones or low equipment ones don't have lids on them, but most of my aquariums now have lids on them. And I mainly did that for condensation. So I wouldn't have to top up all the time, right? Because a lot of water was evaporating. But what I also noticed is that in doing so, my electricity bill dropped a little bit. And if we look at the bill for this month compared to last month, this month my bill is at $217, and last month it was at $275, right? And the only difference I did between those 2 months was add a ton of lids to all of my tanks, right? And what adding lids to your tank does for your aquarium, outside of allowing you not to top off as much and not allowing your fish to jump out of the aquarium, but it also makes sure that the volume of water stays more consistent, right? We know that a larger body of water, it takes a lot longer for that to cool down or heat up, but a smaller body of water, well, it takes a lot shorter time for that to heat up or cool down, right? And so if your aquarium has a lid on it, right, its volume is gonna stay higher. And in addition to that, any heat that dissipates, right, off the surface, some of it is gonna escape. That's just gonna happen. But some of it is gonna help be contained within the tank for a longer period of time, meaning that your heater may not be on for as long. Now, another way you can lower energy costs, and this is really applicable if you have a lot of fish tanks like I do, right? So if you have your own dedicated fish garage or fish room, then you can kind of do this. And that's where you can use one light to light 3 or 4 tanks, right? That's where you can use one pump to filter 10 tanks, 12 tanks, 20 tanks, right? So instead of each tank having its own filter and its own light, you're able to get one master air pump, right, that then feeds tubing and sponge filters to all the other aquariums that you have. So that way you're using one plug with one electricity source with one set wattage being used, right? One set wattage being used. And so that helps save a ton on product costs, but it also helps save a ton on just electricity bill in general. So at the end of the day, one single aquarium isn't going to consume a lot of energy, right? Just about $5.50. But as you start to accumulate more and more fish tanks, like you probably are if you're watching this video, then the cost really does add up. And being able to use one light source for multiple tanks, one heater for multiple tanks, or maybe you just heat the room, having lids on your tanks, having one central filtration source really goes a long way into lowering your energy bill. Well guys, that wraps up today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Drop some comments down below on some of the tips and tricks that you use to lower the energy cost when you have a lot of aquariums. Until next time guys, see ya.